So thank you everyone for joining in. I think we are we have a couple of more people joining in, and I'm sure that people would join in as we progress. Uh, but let's start this off. A very good afternoon to everyone. My name is Anup Valsan, and I'm a part of the growth team here at KNOLSKAPE. I'll be your moderator for today for the topic on future of work. Welcome to all of you. Today we have a very special guest with us, and it's a privilege for us to have him, a practitioner, a leader, an innovator who's actively shaping the future of work across banking, financial services, and the insurance sector. Mr. Anupam Suri, the head of learning and development at Aditya Birla Capital. A warm welcome to you, Anupam, and thank you so much for choosing to spend your valuable 60 minutes with us.
Thank you, Anup, and absolutely a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So, to all the attendees, while we are living through what many are calling the most significant transformation in the history of financial services, not just a technological upgrade, but a fundamental re-imaging of how work gets done, what skills hold value, and what leadership looks like in the era of defined by artificial intelligence. So over the next 60 minutes, we will explore the opportunities, the challenges this transformation presents to us. From the reskilling of frontline workers to the evolving mandate to the C-suite, our goal is not just to discuss what is changing, but to surface actionable insights that organizations can take forward. So very excited to have Anupam here with us to discuss this. Anupam, while you have such a deep experience, very specifically in the financial services side, working with large organizations, the banking side of it, the GCC side of it, etc. What would you think, while today none of us can actually escape the thought of AI? It could be an individual or an organization. So according to you, this has been one of the standard questions, etc., that's going around making those marks, but would really love to hear from you. The BFSI sector historically has been a slow into change, right? When we had the internet revolution, we had the digital transformation that was there, and now the AI transformation that's coming in, right? So while the BFSI sector has been historically slow, how do you characterize the pace of AI-driven transformation today in the industry, Anupam?
Sure. Thanks, Anup, for that question. I think, and while we broadly say that the BFSI sector has been slow, I think one trick that we miss in the whole process is that while we club everything in BFSI under one sector, is actually multiple subsectors as well, right? There are large PSU banks that have been around for ages with legacy systems, with a large scale workforce and so on and so forth. You then have probably a few more nimble players in the banking space or in the insurance space. You have NBFCs, which, in their own right are kind of large organizations to that extent. Again, some of them may have, legacy technology that they're dealing with and so on and so forth. And then obviously we have the fintechs of the world today. So again, I think while we look at it from a broad lens perspective, and it seems that the pace of adoption is slow, I think some of these factors come in the way when organizations are trying to implement change as they go across. Now, I think in reality, if you were to look at the entire sector, yes, the pace in India is bifurcated. And that split is actually the real story, because even RBI's own survey that they did for the free AI, which is the report, the framework that they've just created around regulated entities and ethical adoption of AI, talks about the fact that roughly about 21% of the surveyed entities are currently deploying AI, right? And mostly in areas like customer support, sales, maybe credit underwriting, and so on and so forth. And about 67% are have expressed interest in terms of actually exploring it. So you have a situation where there is a sector that is overwhelmingly interested, but the actual deployment is still in the early stages. And I think a lot of us are still trying to figure out what does it take to implement, where do we implement, how do we implement some of those things. And again, as we said, BFSI has been a very regulated sector. So again, there is what can you implement versus what you can't.
True.
A large scale deployment, some of those challenges typically come our way. But I think there are many pilots which are already on. I don't think they've fully scaled up to be a stage where you can see widespread application. Some organizations are far ahead in the whole process. Some organizations are still kind of lagging behind. But I think what's important to also consider is that India already has a large digital public infrastructure, right? You look at UPI, you look at Aadhaar based onboarding, you look at the account aggregator process. So I think the deployment to production gap is probably where we are still seeing a little bit of a lag. The constraint isn't appetite, the constraint isn't infrastructure. So I think once we have some of these things clearer, we see actual results coming out, I think the pace of adoption is only going to go higher rather than slower.
Absolutely. Absolutely. On point, Anupam. I was just thinking of it while you mentioned that it's a very highly regulated space, right? So it cannot be run on Vincent's fancies, etc., bringing in new tools, etc., on AI. And at the same time, when you look at the kind of scale of technology that today Indian banking is, the UPI is adopted in multiple other countries, right? People are really happy with what is there. So I think it's that gap that you rightly pointed out. That is from where it's getting adopted to large adoption levels. That could be the gap, and that could really ramp up as things get sorted. I think it's more on the governance side. I think RBI also plays a very key role in this to regularize the AI usage. But then, absolutely, that's great to speak on, and it's a good thought as well. Anupam, this while we think of this, etc., everybody, right? Today, me, you, I've spoken to multiple clients. You've seen the kind of psychological safety with respect to AI that's coming in. There's a lot of news around as well, right? AI and jobs, etc., that are there. Then there's also a talk about how can people using AI still remain, and people who don't are left behind. Um, when it comes to very specifically to the BFSI side, beyond the typical back office processing roles, are there any unexpected functions that can be really leveraging AI today in the space?
So I think I'm sure there are. I think what most organizations have started with, and especially when you look at roles that are kind of becoming more AI driven to that extent, I think most organizations will start with businesses or functions which have high volumes, which are rule based, probably document heavy work. So things like manual KYC, manual onboarding, and many organizations have kind of started here because it lends itself very easily to what the AI benefits are seen to that extent. Now, having said that, I think there is there is a there is a risk, and I think people are kind of evaluating that risk when they're looking at deploying it to other areas.
Yeah.
I think that risk is primarily there are, again, I think, and I go back to something that I heard somebody talking about a few days ago. uh, Most universities today will kind of try and put in systems where they're saying to students, don't use AI in your submission and so on and so forth. But reality is, because AI is so prevalent, people have access to Gemini, people have access to Claude,
Yes.
people have access to everything. There is no way you can prevent it from happening, right?
True.
Then in that case, saying how do you integrate it into the work that you are doing, which then becomes the critical element of it. Now,
True.
the way I look at it, AI has the potential to make you lazier, and the AI has the potential to make you more impactful at work. Now, which route do you take will
Yeah.
actually be the individuals kind of managing that, right? So I look at it saying I have a deadline to meet, so I kind of give some commands, give some prompts into the AI tool that I use, and I pick up whatever has come up and simply copy paste. I have finished what I could have taken two days to do in about 15 minutes. But again, I am not so sure that the quality of work would actually be as much. However, I can do it the reverse way around as well, saying, let me do my initial research through this, and then I start applying the mind, which makes it more efficient. Uh, Effectiveness comes in from what I bring to the picture. Now, so I think with that long-winded background to this, where I'm looking at is there are certain roles that I probably don't see going the AI way as much. Things around, let's say, relationship and advisory roles, right? Which involves complex advice, it involves sensitive claims. There is an element of resolution. Now here, what can happen is that the roles become bifurcated. In that sense, saying the groundwork for all of this can be done by machines, by AI. However, the application of what needs to be done is something that a human would still have to kind of get to doing to that extent. So I think there is potential to take AI a little deeper into organizations. However, I think again, I'm going to reference the RBI free AI framework as well, where they have emphasized that you can't simply come back and say that this black box made a decision. Somebody
Yeah.
has to own that decision. So the human in the loop will continue to be important. Though I think they'll migrate more towards the more complex, the more advisory, the more judgment-oriented decisions rather than plain vanilla crunching numbers to that extent.
Yeah. And I think absolutely, Anupam. And this actually triggers one particular discussion that I had with one of my clients very recently.
Uh-huh.
While everybody talks about AI, and we were looking at creating an AI academy, etc., their biggest fear or the reality that came in is the people who are about 0 to 5 years experience, 0 to 3 years experience, typically when they're coming in, they're already very hands-on with AI, right?
Correct.
They really need not be taught saying that use this tool and that tool. But at the same time, when they take that tool away from them, everything drops, right? Their productivity drops. They don't know what to do, what is next, right?
Yep.
So that is like you said, making people lazy, etc. I think effective usage of AI comes into play, and that leads me to the same thing that's been doing rounds 1 week, right? The tokenization impact, the cost of using
Correct.
AI.
Correct.
The comparison between using AI and a human. Now using AI is started becoming more expensive than having a human on ground, right? So I think absolutely, I think as this gets matured, I think as processes get matured, organizations get matured, I think there'll be certain ways in which, maybe restricted ways in which, or governed ways in which organizations will start using AI, right?
Correct.
So that's it. So in that context, very specifically, Anupam, I'm very keen to understand in the L&D role that you're playing typically within the organization, you've seen the industry, etc. When it comes to skilling within the
Mhm.
organization, right?
Mhm.
What do you think? With very keeping AI in the center, is it the technical AI skills that is more relevant or the need of the hour, or is it the behavioral side of it which is the need of the hour? So technical is obviously the tools, the etc. So the behavioral is the skill set and the mindset to use AI. What do you feel, Anupam?
Well, I think, see, again, it's the broad thought process is that unless you know where you are going, any road will take you there, right? I mean, that's the we've heard it, Alice in Wonderland, a long time ago. So I think when organizations are deploying AI more from a learning and development and an upskilling perspective, I think what we also need to be fairly clear about is what are we trying to achieve through that whole process. So yes, there is a certain level of awareness of tools that exist that is required. I think basics around learning how to prompt better. So, and, I stay away from calling it prompt engineering at this stage because, well, you kind of get to that stage after you've played around it with a little bit. Getting to understand what are the capabilities, what are the guardrails, what are some of the hallucinations that can happen, etc., may be essential for pretty much everyone in the organization.
Hmm.
But again, you've got to realize is that for many organizations, those guardrails are more important than the actual tools that you also use as well. I mean, okay, let me not call it more important, but they are equally important because what data can flow out of the organization, what can't, what is available in the public domain, what is not, is also very, very important. So yes, there will be some level of basic knowledge that will be required. However, how are you going to use that? See, again, technology will always be a tool in my mind. While I know there are early reports about AI taking over, doing things independently, etc. It all again, like I said, goes back to saying what are we going to deploy it for, and
Mm.
that thought process, that implementation process will have to be more, led by uh, in innovation, the planning, the judgment, the complex decision making, etc., in terms of that. So yes, you will require people to get trained on the tools, because for a lot of them, this is the first time that they would be exploring some of this sort. But then you also need to continue to invest in decision making, in people being able to use the apply that knowledge effectively. So I go back to something that you said, right? 5 years, 0 to 5 years work experience, they are absolutely comfortable with AI. Take away the tools, and their productivity drops. Why does it drop? Because there is no usage of what the brain power, the human power really in terms of that is. So you're simply relying on the tool to do everything for you, rather than then taking the output of the tool and saying, okay, is this giving you what you needed? What do you need to improve upon? And so on and so forth in terms of that. So I think that balance will be required, and different parts of the organization will obviously use the same tool differently. I mean, to give you an example, somebody might be using it for doing deep research. Somebody else might need to do it for simply creating presentations which look fancy, and so on and so forth. So the skill sets, the behavioral knowledge, etc., will kind of then need to start getting bifurcated in terms of what roles people are doing. However, a base level understanding and then a detailed, expertise around what are you going to use it for, is something which still will be required. So I don't think it's an either and or question. It's actually an and. You probably start with generalization, with general awareness, and so on and so forth before you start specializing into certain areas. So I think quite similar to what medical education looks like. You primarily first look at generalization and then start identifying your specialization. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I think great point. I think you gave that the and is the right answer. It has to go hand in hand. Considering that the roles are getting augmented these days,
correct.
I
Yeah.
think it really has to go hand in hand. That really puts me into one of the very specific thoughts that I had very
Yeah.
specifically, or a question that I had, right? Um, for you, what would typically work, Anupam, when you're sitting at the leader side of it? You're looking at what is changing in the whole ecosystem, what is my priorities, etc. At the same time, you have the challenge of AI coming in. It's time for people to start at least speaking about it, etc. What would your strategy be? Would it be scaling, say reskilling at scale, like going ahead and having a lot of general stuff that's going on
Mm.
to everybody? Or are you going to start picking pockets of cohorts, saying that, hey, okay, let me look at this, rather than taking an enterprise-wide license of a particular tool? I would want to sit back and see what each team needs, which again is a tedious process. But then what would you think, Anupam? What would work for you?
See, and I think one thing that so far my exposure to AI, and it's been very basic, let me call it that. I do a little bit of prompting. I use a few tools. I haven't gone into depth, but I think what has led me, okay, so what has it led me to kind of learn is that we are any which ways in a world now which is moving away from deterministic outcomes to probabilistic outcomes, and I think that's the core of AI.
Hmm.
I think as I went through my management education some 30 years ago, it was saying, X or Y. There were two options: you build or you buy. There is, so on and so forth. So it was either or, not as much and in that whole process. Now today we kind of realize with AI there are a lot of probabilistic outcomes which are also kind of coming through. So a 2 plus 2 is not always equal to a 5. It could be, or a 4. It could be many things, 5, 1, whatever in that. So I think again the answer to that question is a combination of saying yes, you will require a certain level of general awareness all across so that people understand what it actually means. And I think most organizations, their probable way of approaching it is saying, let's start with a few pilots where we are also implementing certain things. Let's see how that is coming out for us, while we build general understanding about knowledge about AI skills to that extent. So again, now whether I'm going to take an enterprise-wide license right upfront, uh, depends on what budgets do I have available, who's offering me what to that extent. So, for example, if I were to look at, let's say, my organization right now, considering the fact that we do work with Microsoft, we've got Copilot Basic available to everyone in the organization above a particular job band level. But we're also doing some work at a group level to say, okay, can we build some of our own models and therefore make that available to other people as well. However, depending on what outcomes of pilots are coming through, some people might get access to Copilot Premium, for example. We're still grounding it with Copilot. The version that we use is grounded. We're not using too many other technologies right now. But that's how organizations would typically start with. And then as and when some of the benefits start becoming a little more clearer, a little more realistic, then probably go deeper into saying, do we need premium licenses? But do we need it for everyone? The answer to that honestly is no, because again, as you said, today tokenization and the amount of tokens that you are consuming and what you are ending up with is probably then going to outweigh the benefits that you are getting because the costs are now going higher. So I think at some stage it will move away from experimentation and playing to actually driving business results. That's when a lot more clarity and focus will come in terms of saying what tools do you use, how much do you use, what are you training people on how to use the tools. Because I don't know, again, from many of us, I think we all use AI tools to some extent. The reason why Claude will run out of its limit at one particular day, because we are using it more in a conversational mode, saying, "Hi, can you please do this? Can you please?" I mean, generally, being polite, but reality is that every word that you use is going to use up some token. So, how do you become more efficient at that is something that will get driven over a period of time. So, again, as I said, a combination. You need
Yes.
general awareness, but you also need specific, outcomes coming out of it. So you don't make the premium versions available to everyone because then you are kind of going to bust the budget very, very quickly. If I remember correctly, I read somewhere that I think was it Uber or somebody who
Uber,
kind of,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
but,
Uber.
4 months they've completed, they exhausted their entire budget that they had for that. So yeah.
Yeah. No, interesting, Anupam. And that actually, while L&D teams are really into transformation, have a lot of projects coming in, Anupam. And again, I'm sure that AI also is on the cards. L&D folks are responsible for this
Correct.
transformation. Um, but honestly, I want to put you into a spot, right? um, Within your organization or say outside, like looking at an industry specific, I think that's more apt.
Hmm.
BFSI as a industry, when you look at the L&D folks, you have been around, etc. How prepared are they for this, Anupam, to take up this challenge?
So, okay, I will probably, again, I think I candidly, but I don't think we are completely ready, right? But I think the conditions to kind of move forward do exist. Uh, See, all said and done, I think what tends to happen, and while I'm sure a lot of my L&D colleagues will probably hate me for saying this, we do help people learn the behavior of change and managing change and so on and so forth. However,
Hmm.
I'm not so sure we are so open to change ourselves. We tend to rely quite a lot on what has worked in the past without necessarily, and I'm not saying that everyone does that. People are not experimenting. There's a lot of experimentation that goes on. But I think changing a structure, changing an approach, changing your philosophy means giving up on a lot of things that you've learned over a period of time. And I think a lot of us are great at learning. We are brilliant at relearning. We are not so good at unlearning. And that's why I think what becomes an important aspect, which becomes a barrier where we are not necessarily ready completely. But I think,
True.
as I said, it's available today, around you. There are tools which are available. Your organizations would have some form of tool available or AI implemented to that extent. And I think people do realize that, well, at some point in time, you will need to start integrating it into the work. I think that the problem comes in when you see it as a me versus you situation, saying it's either this or that. Well, again, if you look at it, the tool has its utility. It can allow you to do a lot more research than you would otherwise be able to do on your own. How can you integrate that into what your organization requires? And that's something that you can start implementing and doing to that extent. So again, I think what I spoke about for the BFSI sector at large is true for L&D professionals as well. Some of us are on the edge of actually active experimentation and so on and so forth. Some of us are still struggling with the basics around understanding what it is all about, and some are saying, okay, let me just sit back and wait for somebody else to implement it. We'll see how it goes, and then we'll start looking at some of those things. But yes, I think we are not yet completely ready as an L&D function to embrace AI and do work to that extent. There is great stuff available outside. Skill sets required are changing. There was a point in time I remember, I think way back, when if you had great content creation skills, you were in demand. Today, content is available for free. I
Yeah.
think curation of content has become a lot more important than this thing. But now, can any AI tool help you in curation of content? I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are people are experimenting active. And that's how you would look at it, saying, how do you keep integrating it into the work that you take forward?
Yeah. No, fair point, Anupam. In fact, I think I'm with you on that. I think while there are certain, obviously, while you say we typically, the BFSI industry typically relies on tried and tested ways, it could always be the kind of nature of work and the space that you are in, right? Because you are with customers, the money that flows in, you need to have that trust building, etc., that
Yep.
needs to happen and things, and that could basically maybe have an impact on how you think as L&D leaders as well. But no, thank you for being very candid, Anupam, and I'm sure that we can take away certain things that way in terms of how we can become more agile, how can things change for us as well.
Yep.
While we have been speaking about a lot of macro things that's happening in the BFSI side, we're talking about the workforce side of it, we're talking about the reskilling side of it. I wanted to quickly shift my thought into the inclusion, equity, the human side of it, because you did mention that you had a stint in diversity, etc., right? So as per you, right, like while there's a lot of things going on, do you think the introduction of AI has a lot of impact in diversity, equity, inclusion, meaning while those remain priorities of any sector, does it present a genuine opportunity to have a level playing field, right? What do you think?
So I think one of the things, Anupam, that is saying, how will we, and so what segment are we looking at inclusion for, or what segment are we looking at diversity from a diversity lens as well? So again, I think when you look at gender as a lens, there will be a slightly different approach to it. If you look at, let's say, LGBTQ inclusion as a lens, there could be a slightly different approach. The way I look at it, AI to my mind is an amplifier. It can and I'm going to look at it also from an employment and a customer lens in some sense, if you permit me. See, in India, the way I look at it is that AI can widen inequality by default, and I'll explain what I mean by that. And it will narrow it only by deliberate design to that extent. Now, the risk is, if you look at it, where are we kind of going ahead with automation and so on and so forth in AI right now? It's the operational and the contact center roles, etc. Where we're looking at, voice bots, we're looking at changing, doing processes which are becoming more oriented and so on and so forth. Now, when you look at India from a formal sector employment point of view, these are also the places where for women, for first generation, smaller town, maybe lower income workers, that's your entry point. Now, if those rungs vanish and reskilling flows already to, how do I put it, advantaged, if I may use that word, urban employees, AI is going to widen that existing gap right now between what is urban, what is not primary urban in terms of employment space and all that. And I think this is where somewhere the RBI paper also flags it off, saying there is an opportunity with a country this diverse. It can mean my bias. It can mean across language, caste, gender, and so on and so forth in terms of that. Having said that, you're also looking today at using AI capability to extend credit and insurance to vernacular rural customers, probably not as comfortable with the language, thin file, they don't have credit histories, etc. Previously invisible to the system that was operating. So there you have, if you've got a deliberate design in place, you have an option of actually reducing the differences between groups to that extent. However, if you leave it to its own, yes, there is obviously risk of bias, inherently in terms of how the models are trained at times, inherently in terms of how opportunities flow to which parts of the world, etc., along with that. So again, like I said, potential to go either way exists. If there is a deliberate thought process in terms of how you can implement, how you can use AI to reduce, improve diversity scores and so on and so forth, yes, the opportunity will be much higher. But if you leave it to its own, it could go either way because there are obviously inherent biases in the tools as well.
Great perspective, Anupam. And I think you got all of us thinking as well, because I was looking at in a lens saying that, because while I was thinking of this, I was always thinking that it could actually create a level playing ground. But then there are two sides to the coin, right? And some things that can be like a pro and some cons that really come in. But it always comes back to how a human is able to actually orchestrate this entire thing well, right? So that's absolutely great thought, Anupam. Great thought there. Anupam, while we always had this, the BFSI segment has multiple services, sub services, right? So core banking services, etc., that are there. The core insurance side of it that are there. There are NBFCs in tier one who operates only in tier two, tier three, etc., that are there. As per you, while I'm sure, same, I've seen myself, or in fact, all of us have seen that the banking side has always had some AI as a part of their thing, with chatbots coming in, your ability to, like you said, credit scoring, your ability to lend, etc. That's happening. But when you have so many subsectors, you have tiers that you're operating in. Do you think one particular tier or one particular domain stands out and says that, okay, we will actually be adopting AI at a great pace? Do you think anything in that sort? Any thoughts there?
So again, I think, and like I said, maybe when different industries have been evaluating usage of AI in different domains. Like I said, I think credit underwriting probably was the first area that a lot of organizations looked at from the lending perspective, because you are, whether it is in terms of preparation of CAM documents, whether it is in terms of looking at what's existing and not, that's something which is doable. I think insurance does a fair, the insurance industry is doing a lot of work in terms of being able to identify that. But again, I think from a scale of operations perspective, I would say probably the fintechs will take a lead because they have a far more agile workforce. I think when you look at the AI natives, if I may use that term, probably being far more in fintechs than with maybe the legacy organizations to that extent. So I see a lot of the initial proof of concept, initial quick results, etc., coming more from these nimble players than from the larger organizations to that extent, because the larger organizations will have other challenges in terms of also at times around regulation, in terms of, like I said, legacy systems and so on and so forth to deal with before they kind of reach that stage. Not to say that they will not adopt it, but they will probably go a little more cautiously compared to maybe some of the fintechs of the world. So again, I think from an innovation implementation perspective, I see the fintechs, the smaller players kind of being a lot more nimble and agile than the larger players. The larger players will have already started implementing certain things, but it's not full scale across the entire organization yet.
Yeah. Great point there, Anupam. And in fact, you just mentioned AI native, right? And there's been always a conversation going
Correct.
on. Then AI native talent, etc. Now,
Yeah.
considering that they've been growing up with these AI tools, etc., how should BFSI institutions balance the hiring this new talent versus developing existing employees? Any thoughts there, Anupam?
See, I think as you look at as a country, if you were to look at it, and primarily speaking India, BFSI, our edge maybe is not as much. It isn't necessarily AI fluency. I think we have that in abundance. It's, I think, AI fluency fused with regulatory judgment. I think that's where it becomes important. Now, I go back to something that we mentioned before. People come into the workforce, they're very comfortable with AI tools, technologies, etc. You take them away, suddenly efficiency goes for a toss, right?
Mhm.
We see that when we bring in summer trainees into the organization, interns into the organization. Now, in their colleges, they are using everything. They're using Claude, they're using OpenAI, they're using Gemini and whatnot, etc. And here we come back and say, you can't use all of that because we have guardrails around that. And suddenly it seems like a big culture shock to people in terms of that. So I think we need, again, going back to that, we will need both, right? We need people who are AI native talent because they bring in that ability to use technology, change, etc., into the world. However, you have a number of people in the organization who probably have that deep product expertise, deep regulatory expertise, etc., where it will be useful to kind of get them upskilled or reskilled into being able to use that, because you can't simply replace that with AI natives. I think it's a process where people have become experts, or people know that through years of experience as well, and you simply can't crunch that experience into that. So again, I think you need you need to bring in fresh blood. You need to bring in this talent because their ability to work with tools, technology, etc., is much higher. But you
Mhm.
also need your existing people to kind of ensure that that judgment that is required, the regulatory expertise that is required, the product knowledge that is required is still there. Otherwise, you will kind of get very fast, confident, non-compliant decisions. And now with the DPDP Act as well, the downside is that there are penalties associated with all of that, because your experienced workforce is kind of slightly inverse to these people. They may not have the capability from a technology AI perspective, but they have the knowledge. So how do you kind of bring in AI native talent that bring that kind of seeds culture and capability, but keep reskilling the existing people who already carry the regulatory context, and therefore you're probably covered for both ends of the story to that extent.
Absolutely, Anupam, and very, very interesting point that you mentioned, right? You need both. You need the AI native talent and also the existing
Yep.
employees, right, with deep product knowledge. For me, when I look at that, that's a great opportunity to build a collaborative work culture,
Yep.
right? There is a lot of respect for each other, right? The ones that are newly joining in, been working with existing folks who have been veterans.
Correct.
The veterans have the same feeling, saying that we are learning something new from the ones that are coming. So I feel there's a lot of cultural opportunity to build on that as well.
Correct. And I think it again, if I were to take an example from the banking world, it goes back into the past. When you would, in the earlier era, when public sector banks weren't necessarily known for the quality of service. Now,
Mm,
even if you had to go and withdraw your money from the bank, forget the ATM, there was no ATM at that time. You went to the branch to withdraw your money. You didn't get great service, but if you had a problem, your problem got resolved.
mm,
Then I think that with comparatively the newer age banks coming in, not necessarily did the problem get resolved, but you got some decent service. So again, I think what is critical is really both. You want to feel good about the interaction, but not at the cost of your work not getting done.
mm.
Right. So that's
Right.
where that merging of cultures becomes important to that extent. So you do want fresh blood, you want AI talent, etc., but you don't want to run into a regulatory risk, right? So how do you bring it together in the best possible way is the challenge for most organizations now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So while we are very close to our session before the question
Yeah,
and answers, one very specific question to sum up
sure.
all of this that I had, Anupam, it would be really nice if you could throw some light on this because for us and the attendees here, right?
Mhm.
If I want to sum it up, say if you look 5 to 10 years out, right, what does the BFSI workforce actually look like? So what I mean is in terms of size, composition, obviously the nature of work, etc. Pretty much we know what it would be, but then What do you think in terms of the size and composition that's going to be there with all the AI coming in and things like that?
Sure. So I think, and while again, I think I'm going to look at it also from a job context as well, because that's where I think part of the question comes from. I think if you look at any major change that has happened, and I'm sure this is not too different from that, though the scale looks different, the pace looks different. I think there was a time when the whole IT revolution came in. I think a lot of jobs went away, but I think a lot of new jobs got created as well. I think it's going to be similar with an AI perspective. So while there is probably a lot of that automation and all that that's going to go away, there's a lot more in terms of judgment, in terms of complex decision making, etc., in terms of people managing that entire process, which is going to come in as well. The BFSI sector in itself is not going away, because for any country to grow, any economy to grow, you need credit, you need financial services in the broadest sense, etc.
Yeah.
I'm sure when you look at data which is available outside, we are still underinsured as a country, so insurance is not going to go away, etc. Yes, everyone will look at saying, how do you become more efficient at what you do? But I think the go forward model is that people will not just chase efficiency for the sake of efficiency, but I think effectiveness will also start becoming equally important, if it is not already important. So while you will make things more efficient from a what can be low skill work that can be transitioned into tools, technology, machines, etc., you will also require people to manage and that entire infrastructure, manage that entire decision making process, still set strategy decisions and all that. I don't see a stage. I mean, while I think we saw Terminator 1, 2, and 3 a long time ago, I don't still see machines taking over everything right away for everything that we do. But yes, I think that's the way. So we'll become a largely upskilled workforce. We will probably be implementing AI in more and more areas. However, we still see, I think, to my mind, uh, the context of the roles will get changed. You will become, your job role can change quite significantly. You will probably be harnessing AI in bits and pieces or in extremity in terms of the work that you do. But I think you will still be required as the human in the loop, because from a complex decision making, judgment, how do we implement all of that, etc., is still going to be key for the future. So that's how I see this whole thing progressing.
Absolutely, Anupam. I think two very key points there in terms of one is how the new roles are getting created, um,
Yeah,
very specifically, and then how are you moving towards more effective working, right? And that
correct.
meaning that you're adding more value to your work, etc. Right. So that's great points there, and I think Anupam, while I had a great time with you, I'll quickly jump into the
Sure.
question and answers. I think we have a couple of them here. Um, okay, the first one, your way, Anupam. Which BFSI functions do you believe will be fundamentally redesigned in the next 3 years? And is L&D ahead of that curve or catching up to it?
Well, I think I can probably play it safe by saying, pretty much all functions are going to undergo a fundamental redesigning in terms of how they look like. Because as I said, people have already started seeing the benefits of implementing AI in certain functions and what is it that's resulting into them. Uh, L&D will be a function that will change. I think we will still be one of the laggards rather than the front end folks to that extent. But it will happen. We're already seeing organizations where we're implementing skilling at scale using AI. We're using knowledge at scale using AI tools and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think the fundamental way in which functions look like right now might start looking different. But I think everyone will change. Honestly, there is no no option but to change.
I think the resistance is over. It's time for adoption.
Yeah,
That's great. That takes me to the next question here. Where are you seeing the steepest learning gaps in employees um, when it comes to working alongside AI tools rather than just using them? Are they just expected to work alongside the tools rather than just using them.
Yeah, no, I think, and this is where, like I said, the critical this thing is to understand and appreciate what the tool and the technology provide to you, along with what are the limitations. And this is, I think, where the guardrails also start becoming important. Like I said, there is potential to simply outsource to AI and take the output and copy paste and implement where there is. But I think most people would still should, I don't know again how we kind of land up in terms of that. Humans inherently are slightly lazy by nature. I think most of the things that we've developed for our comfort come from our requirement for not doing a few things. I think the potential, like I said, exists to kind of let it simply be outsourced and you take the output and implement it. The challenge is getting people to understand this is the output. Now let me get my thought process, my critical judgment, my ability to think critically on top of that, and how do we then start implementing it? So I think that integration of work is where that steepest learning curve that I see. The boundaries are clearly defined for most people. I think it's about just saying, can I take this as is, or do I still need to put some thought? That understanding that gap is the challenging gap.
Okay, absolutely. Now, Anupam, a very, very learning and development related question, something
Sure.
that always people ask. Everyone talks about learning ROI, right? But in an AI era
Yeah.
transformation, how do you actually measure whether your L&D investments are shifting workforce capabilities at the speed that the business needs it to? Uh,
Yeah. Well, I think learning ROI has been this holy grail of the learning industry for many, many years. But I think something fundamental which still holds good uh, is that impact measurement an afterthought of what you're implementing, or is it a premeditated part of the design of what you're implementing? If
hmm,
it is a premeditated part of what you're implementing, then you already know what are the metrics that you are tracking, what are the metrics that you need to look at, and you will work backwards from there. Unfortunately, and this is true for all learning and development initiatives, not just AI led to that extent, I think most often than not, the implementation happens, and then we start worrying about saying, okay, now that I have to justify it to somebody else, let me
hmm,
try and figure out what's the correlation between what I think should have happened versus what has actually happened, and then is that something that I can build a story about? So my advice really to everyone on this is saying, make your learning impact measurement a critical part of the design of whatever you're thinking of implementing. Because
hmm,
if the goal is awareness,
hmm,
then you can leave it at very basic measures to that extent.
hmm.
But if you're seeing workforce capability transformation, what does it look like? What is it that you are intending to do? Once you've got that in place as a part of the design of whatever you are implementing, the measurement will become easier. I'm not saying it'll mean that it is always positive, but at least you're very clear of what the measures are, rather than trying to retrofit the results to what you wanted to do.
Mhm. Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. I think with you on that, I think when it comes to awareness, I think leaving it at L1, etc. is great. But then when you want an L3, L4, I think going in with a very specific plan would certainly help. And I think 30, 60, 90, all of those are still going to stay. But then how are you really orchestrating that in the space remains very important.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Anupam, okay, there's one more coming in. Couple of more. We have time? Yeah. Yeah. Great. So the next question is, a significant portion of BFSI employees are anxious about AI displacing them. How explicitly does any L&D strategy address that psychological dimension? And what is the honest message one can give people?
So absolutely, I think there was maybe 2 or 3 years ago when this whole concept of psychological safety in the workplace started becoming a lot more important. Though I don't think AI was driving that; it was generally about some of that older research coming across and getting that in place. So I think we need to do a little more work around taking away the fear of change from people. To that extent, I don't think the industry is doing that to that
Hmm,
degree right now. I think the honest response to people is saying that the risk is real, but the risk is real from a skills perspective. So if you have the ability or you have the capability to reskill yourself or move to higher order skills, you are able to transition that change that is going to come in. Like I said, if the role involves searching through Excel sheets and plotting it together and all that, technology can do it far more efficiently than you will be able to do it. However, if it is really in terms of designing certain things, etc., so maybe we are still a couple of years away before technology takes that away. I mean, I hear mitosis coming in and things will look very, very different. But again, I think the capability is around reskilling. The capability that I'm saying, the opportunity is around reskilling. And if you can move to some of the higher order skills to that extent, then you don't necessarily have to worry about replacement of jobs, because the replacement is not necessarily the workforce. It is the replacement is the skill sets required to do the work that you are doing.
Absolutely. And one thought that I had here is typically the L&D folks, while you are really ready for doing certain interventions or projects, but typically in the BFSI side of it, the main concern that comes in is the time that an individual can invest because they're already in their roles. You're
Correct.
talking about a teller, or you're talking about a relationship
Yeah.
manager, you're talking
Yeah.
about XYZ. So it's very important that how are they able to imbibe this in the daily work, right? Starting and things. So that I think would be great. One more question that's coming in. AI has taken space in a lot of discussions for being the next future. But quite recently, organizations have started realizing that AI cannot be the most important thing as it's costlier, not always correct, has limitations.
Yeah.
Do you think AI is definitely the new future or just another tool enabling humans for better results?
See, at the end of the day, the core of business is delivering what you are delivering as an organization, right? So I think, to my mind, organizations don't exist for the purpose of AI. Organizations exist for a specific purpose that they've identified and all that. I think AI today, to my mind, is technology, is tool that can help you reach your goals in a slightly different fashion. Whether it is faster, more efficient, I really don't know. But you still will need a business strategy. You still will need outcomes that you are driving. You then need to figure out saying, how does AI help you do that better, faster, stronger, whatever way you want to look at it. So to that extent, I would still say that AI will continue to be a tool in the process. It will be a technology that you will implement that will help you get there. It can't replace the the reason for existence of the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really well put, Anupam. I think for people to stay focused and say, what is the reason I'm here? What is the problem that I'm solving for
Correct.
remains? And you are just an enabler. That's a part of it, right?
Yeah.
Great. One more question. Okay. We'll start the poll. So,
Sure.
okay, you just quickly put a poll up, Anupam, and all you viewers, uh, attendees out there. It will be really nice if you could cast your vote. I can read this for you. Would you like to be contacted by our BFSI SMEs after this webinar? Yes, for a product demo. Yes, for a consultation. Yes, send me the resources only, and not at this time. We'll have a couple of seconds for you to quickly select. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Anupam, the next question, oh, there are multiple questions here. So I think I'm moving around and seeing which one was answered. But then as AI takes over more of the analytical, procedural, and even rational tasks in BFSI, what is your honest view of what unique human contributions will look like in this industry a decade from now?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know whether I can predict as far as a decade from now to that extent. However, I think the way that I look at it is And maybe I'm relying, at least for the BFSI industry, I'm still relying on what the RBI Free Eye framework talks about, because it's treating innovation and risk mitigation as being complementary skills, and therefore humans being accountable for AI decisions as well. So I think in that sense, what my thought process is that uh, humans will still be required to take those complex decisions and all of that. A lot of the grunt work will probably get eliminated by AI, because that's what machines will take over and be able to do. I don't know whether that, that actually answers the question, but I mean that's my take on this.
Yeah. Sure. I think thank you, Anupam, and I think we'll wind up now. I think a lot of questions, a lot of talking that we've done, and I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I hope all the attendees enjoyed it. And thank you everyone for joining KNOLSKAPE's second annual BFSI Learning Week, and being with both me and Anupam here. It was our pleasure. Anupam, again, thank you so much. And thank you for spending this time with us. And it
My
was
pleasure.
very,
My
very,
pleasure.
very, very interesting discussions. I've had a lot of learnings from this, made note of few of your thoughts, the way it is. And I look forward to meeting you soon, Anupam. Yeah,
Look forward. Thank you so much for hosting me, and it was absolutely a pleasure to have this conversation.
sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.